Welcome back to the Winner's Circle, everybody. Today I am here with Keith from Arcova. They are the latest Fortress Cybersecurity Award winner, and he is on the front lines of keeping us protected from AI. He has been evolving this company for quite a long time. Keith, welcome to the show, and congratulations on all the success.
Russ, thanks for having me, and thank you on the award as well.
Before we get into all this new cybersecurity and AI threats and everything that you're seeing, give us a little bit of background on Arcova and kind of your journey to Arcova.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. We started out as a cybersecurity practice within Morgan Franklin Consultant, build that out as a independent business within Morgan Franklin as Morgan Franklin Cyber. And about 18 months ago, we executed a management buyout that was private equity backed by MC Partners to become an independent standalone company, which is where we are today. And we've been continuing to grow and build behind that momentum. And really, the thesis behind our business is many of us have been practitioners. We've been in the field. We've worked at companies. We've been buyers and had that experience before. And really taking a lot of those lessons learned and some of those challenging buying experiences that we have and trying to solve those problems for our client and make it easier to engage, right? We want to be a trusted partner, somebody they can rely on to execute and deliver what needs to be done so that, ultimately they have the results that they want and we become a great partner in that process.
Well, it's interesting you say that because you spent a career on the kind of client side of cybersecurity inside, I think you were in a Fortune financial institution, kind of big financial institution before you kind of co-founded Arcovia. What did you see inside of that large enterprise security that, or that organization that made you want to build a firm that was kind of on the other side of the table?
Yeah, so yeah, I worked at a lot of the large financial institutions throughout most of my career, and as buyers in that space, um, we saw the opportunity, right? So there was uh, a lot of buying going on with partners in the space, and as we were working through that, we were learning about the things that were challenges in that process, right? Whether it be working with extremely large organizations that have a lot of bureaucracy that trickles its way into the client buying experience, whether it be things like dealing with constant change orders for small changes in projects and things like that. And so as buyers, those were things we would go out to industry conferences or events and we would talk about them. And coming over to Arcova, right, the whole idea was how do we do this a little bit better? How do we solve these kind of challenges for our clients? We want to be there to execute. We've been practitioners. We understand the pressure of being in the seat, but how do we make the buying experience more nimble, flexible, allow our clients to pivot, right? And that really is where we built our foundation is around that flexibility and listening to our client problems and not trying to sell them something that they didn't ask for, but focus on delivering what they need.
It's interesting you say that because I've seen that a lot in my sales career and in sellers of kind of actually it's more almost implementers when they go in to implement a project. It's what is the process, let me get it done, and it's almost like the client is the problem. you know and it sounds like you're taking the opposite side, which is, expect change orders, expect change. You're there to solve problems, and that's really what it's about. um, you've been through this massive kind of change yourself over the last year, 18 months, where I think you went through the divestiture, an acquisition, an AI practice launch, and then a full rebrand. Which
Yes.
of those changes felt like the biggest gamble at the time?
Um, I, I'm I tend to be a little bit risk averse. I don't like I wouldn't say gamble, but certainly every step in that process created a lot of excitement. So executing on the management buyout and partnering up with our private equity partner through that process, I think that was a major milestone and it was a major transition in how we operate. Right, we can make independent decisions. We can do what's best for the business, and ultimately trickle down to what's best for our clients in that process. And so I think the client experience was elevated through that process, and I think it really set the foundation for us to do everything else, to grow, uh, to make the acquisitions, to do um, the launch of the AI practice, which is now sort of incorporated into what we do day to day, and continue to build, and then ultimately. The brand changed from Morgan Franklin Cyber to Arcova which was a few months ago, and just build on that momentum. So, I think they were all really exciting moments, but I do think the private equity backed management buyout was really sort of a catalyst event.
Yeah. When you go into an enterprise or they call you in, what's the actual problem they think they have, and how often do you find a problem that, is a lot different than what they expected?
Well, it's interesting. I think that's evolving. We tend to work with large enterprise clients, and typically those buyers are fairly sophisticated. More often than not, they understand their problems. More often than not, they're either looking for advisory on how to fix that problem. Sometimes they have a great concept of what needs to be fixed and maybe what the end state looks like, but bridging that gap. Uh, and then a lot of times too, they need somebody who understands how to get their hands dirty and actually execute on that idea, right? And so I think that that's really where we shine, and that's really where we try to kind of be a little bit different for our clients.
Well, AI is all over the boardroom. I imagine it's all over your clients' rooms and boardrooms too. It's changing both sides of the equation. It's how attackers operate and how we have to defend those attacks. Without naming kind of specific incidents, how has that shifted your kind of engagements with enterprises? What are they asking for this year versus kind of 2 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I think clients are looking for right now it's a lot of focus on efficiency with AI. Like how do we get more out of I think that will continue to evolve. We've seen these things, right? Well, the big transition to cloud, I think there was a lot of like it mainly being focused on efficiency in the beginning, and then it became about how to operate differently and how can we be more nimble and how can we, you know, change the way we operate. And I think AI is going through a similar evolution right now. We're seeing a need for us to work faster, a need for us to have AI integrated into our solutioning. I think the software focus, at least what we've seen, the software focus is starting to shrink a little bit, and people are looking at more what's the holistic end-to-end service that you get from that solution. And so, we feel really well positioned to help our clients through that and build around that. But I think AI is fundamentally shifting the way people look at solutioning problems in really industry everywhere. And AI is not a technology problem; it is integrated into the operating model of every business, right from sales to back office to technology and everything. So really is a fundamental shift in the way we execute on business. I mean, in some ways, similar to how computers were integrated into the business world, right? It just totally changed how we do business.
Yeah, I talk about that often. I hate that term that we all went through, the digital transformation.
Yeah.
It was such a horrible name for what we went through. It was more like an online transformation or a network transformation or something. It wasn't digital. That sounds like we were taking cassette tapes and converting into CDs or something. Now you've got this AI world you're talking about, and you've stood up this practice. The thing that I'd love to understand a little bit better is, I've heard recently, Microsoft is pushing, Patch Tuesday patches now that seem to patch 9 million things on your computer because of AI. They're able to go find these vulnerabilities, patch them so that they're no longer, 0-day exploits or exploits on your computer. I imagine that's going on all over the cybersecurity world and all over the hardware and software world as people are using AI to better secure their environments. um, I think Microsoft even stated, or somebody maybe, that in 18 months, all these vulnerabilities will be gone. What does the cybersecurity world look like when those kind of those 0-day exploits and all those kind of known flaws are wiped out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have that opinion that it will go that far. I do believe AI works both ways, and so new exploits I do believe will continue to be found. New paths will continue to be found. Um, and so I do think it's going to be an evolution. AI is going to, on one hand, close the doors quickly, but it's also going to open doors as well. And so I do think there's an evolution. I think traditional threat and vulnerability management, maybe the way that it's been done for the past 10 years, is totally shifting and needs to totally shift. But at the end of the day, right, whether it's coding in new applications, and whether that's vibe coding or coding directly, uh, applications going the SDLC process and all that, there's constantly going to be sort of a back and forth between things being introduced in the environment, configurations happening, and things like that. And I think uh, the onus is on us as an industry to be much quicker at addressing those issues because they're going to be exposed quicker as well from AI. And I think that's what AI allows us to do. It allows us to be much quicker at identifying those types of vulnerabilities and fixing them. And it also allows the adversaries to also identify those much quicker and try to exploit them. So, we work with several large clients that are putting a lot of effort into this right now to um, reduce the vulnerabilities in their organization quickly and drastically. And I think what it's changing is the speed at which all that is happening on both sides of the table right now.
Are you seeing more kind of Are you seeing different types of attacks versus these kind of malware and kind of zero-day exploits? Are we coming into new types of exploits, or are old exploits becoming new again?
Yeah, I think right now we're seeing more of old becoming new. We're similar exploits, different pathways. Um, um, the AI adversarial attacks, I do think, are something that are going to continue to increase. Um, but ultimately, AI is built on information, and it's exposing pathways traditionally that are there. So it's the old is new again. It is also finding new pathways in, right, and that is something we've got to continue to be aware of. But at the same time, right, the the tools and um, techniques that AI can use are what right now what the security researchers use and the pen testers, etc. Now that will evolve, and I think it'll evolve very quickly. In 6 months, the conversation may be completely different. But right now, it's a lot of what's old is new.
How does that change the way you kind of manage detection operationally?
Yeah, I think it's back to what we talked about, right? So it's about speed, and about nimbleness. We're doing a lot more in the detection engineering space, trying to refine what we're looking at, making sure that our team is looking at the right things at the right times. We are also building in, right, autonomous, right? That's been sort of, I would say, buzzword right in the SOC space right now is autonomous SOC. So we are actively working with multiple clients down that path as well. And for a lot of things, it works really well. But detection engineering and understanding all of that is changing as well. And I think as AI integrates, it again, it goes back to the same thing. Speed is really accelerating exponentially right now.
Well, yeah, and it's speed of attacks, right? Of the number of attacks you can get, but they're also, you were talking about getting more efficient. They're getting way more efficient. Breakout times are now under an hour inside of a network. So, like you're saying, your agents have to be either in there or about to be in there to start catching these guys because they're moving quicker once they get in, too, aren't they?
Right, they're moving quicker, and it's our job to do the same, right? And I think that that's been the big push for the agentic SOC has been certainly being able to react to things immediately and using human in the loop for not only validation but understanding sort of some of the complex things that are happening in an environment. And so that combination is where we're focused today. And as I mentioned, we're working with several clients on agentic SOC, whether it's built in house or through third party products.
Well, since you are an expert in this field, the thing that concerns me the most is kind of that authorization layer. We are now providing, at least I am, maybe I shouldn't say this out loud. I'm providing my agents and my AI all sorts of credentials that I've never provided, anyone before. We used to dole these credentials out, API tokens or keys or whatever, very, very judiciously, especially as small business operators, because we didn't want to get caught in some sort of bad scenario or have something taken down. that that authentication layer now seems to be the attack vector for everybody because it's almost like that one password kind of concept. Why is identity now the front line instead of kind of that network perimeter? Is it all that credentialing?
Yeah, well, I think identity plays a bigger and bigger role, right? Non-human identities are increasing exponentially. They're, far have always for a while now, it's far surpassed human identities, and I think the industry right now has tried to look at identity as a potential solution to solve that. I don't think that will work in isolation. I think it's going to have to be a multi-layered approach once this all works out. But it does start with managing non-human identities and understanding the access controls that they have and understanding what they're doing with them and being able to log that and follow that and understand that. And so, uh, right, identity and access management program within a company, the non-human aspect is really becoming mission critical to everything you do. If you think about a house, right, it's who are you giving the keys to the front door to your house, and when do they work, when do they not work, how what are they doing with them, and all that, right? So you need the monitoring layer on there to know and validate. You need a logging layer on there to understand what they're doing. You need the authentication layer. You need to be able to revoke, right, access it at any point. And so there's a lot of steps in the process, but identity is mission critical to sort of everything working. And I think a lot of enterprise companies understand that and are executing against that right now. I would say one of the most common conversations we have in the identity space is about non-human solutioning right now.
Yeah, it scares me to death. It's
Yeah,
it's robots basically with the key, not only the keys to your house, but if you give it control, authority to construct, authority to buy, sell. I mean, you can get pretty crazy with the tools these days. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that gets managed. Do you have a lot of clients coming in to kind of move away from that kind of reactive credential program to more one that's, a little bit more active?
yeah, again, I think it's an evolution. I think clients are trying to solve that problem. They're also trying to solve that problem by being more efficient. There are also products in the market now that are using AI to help solve that problem. So I think it's coming full circle. I think the industry is still evolving in this space, certainly not mature, and still figuring out right the operating model. But yes, clients are trying to solution around this today, and I think like everything else, the speed is accelerating. I think people are trying to understand how to leverage the tools in the best approach, and then also understand how do we put better guardrails on agentic solutions. So there are guardrails, but it's very hard to understand when you're using generative AI. Very hard to understand exactly what that generative AI will do, and the more guardrails you have and the better you can understand them, right, the better you can execute against those projects, right? At the end of the day, AI will put out a sort of a different answer every time you ask it the same question. Now, it might have the same content, but we'll put out a different answer. And the more guardrails you can have to make sure that you're controlling what's accessed, how it's accessed, what it does. And that's why people have traditionally gone back to the non human identities in an IAM practice, because if you control the access, right, that should, in theory, control the data.
Yeah. Well, now I've seen also that there's been an uptick in kind of the third party and supply chain incidents too. That as companies get more hardened and enterprise get more hardened, I think the attackers are now going after the weaker parts, which are, we had another a winner on another Fortress Cybersecurity on called Black Cloak that does kind of enterprise protection for executives at home because that was becoming a threat vector. Now you have these kind of third party kind of vendor and supply chain related incidents kind of growing very, very quickly. How exposed are most enterprises to, risks that they don't, kind of directly control?
Yeah, third party risk management has always been a challenge for the last many years from a risk perspective. Many enterprises run robust programs around that. It's a continued challenge, right? Because you can survey third parties and you can ask them for their controls, but at the end of the day, right, a lot of breaches do happen through third parties. Who unfortunately may not have the resources to have the controls in place that an enterprise company would have. And so, I, again, if we talk about AI, I think AI will help speed the market, both for the adversaries, but also for the good guys, right? And allow um, third party risks to be better evaluated. I think tools will be put in place to allow companies to have a better foundational control uh, around that. And I think companies need to continue to take third party risk seriously, run programs that really evaluate third party risk, and really, really understand who has access to their data, who can get in, and what can they do. And eventually, AI will be play a part of that too, right? Where AI may have the ability to kind of sit alongside the access and make sure they're only doing the things that they should be doing with that access. And I think that's part of the evolution that we're talking about, where AI can create a lot of opportunity for us.
Well, you went through an acquisition recently of Lynx Technology Partners. That was really kind of a third party integration. Did you learn anything there with that integration on how to kind of tighten up controls around, third parties or integration partners?
Yeah, absolutely. Links, great acquisition. We've been really excited and have great momentum with Links. Um, Lynx had a third party risk program and a risk operations center. We've brought over a lot of the um, best practices and integrated into our enterprise third party risk programs to allow us to build on that. And it really was building an operating model around how to manage risk for third parties, being able to standardize that in a way that speaks to the risk language of organizations, and making it continuous, right? So sending out a survey once a year, while you do get good information for that, it is sent out once a year. It's sort of a point in time snapshot, and it's as good as the data that's entered into that. Whereas operating third party risk management is like continuous continuous risk monitoring really changes the way programmatically you look at those things. So Lynx has been a great driver for that for us. The team's been fantastic. Was a great business, been around for a long time, uh, and we love having them here today, and love we'll continue working with the team and everything. They're already fully integrated. I don't even consider them a separate team at all anymore. They're just part of us and part of what we're doing today. And it's Lynx was a great business, and we were happy to do that transaction.
Well, there's a lot of risks in the world too that, we've been talking a lot about that risk in, making acquisitions, rebranding, all the risks in the cybersecurity world now. There's also all these kind of geopolitical risks going on right now in our world. How does that show up in kind of the advice that you give clients?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think during that process, we also expanded into the Middle East, which has been certainly challenging given some of the events happening as well. Um, but we are a big believer that the global environment needs to work together. The global environment needs to have providers that operate in the way we operate, and we do believe we can add value across the board. When we talk to clients, right, ultimately, those ain't those nation state actors, they tend to be incredibly well resourced, and it creates additional risk and instability in the world, right? That leads to increased motivation for those nation state actors to continue to exploit and do malicious things in our environment, or at least stage those attacks. And so, um, you always have to be vigilant, but when things are like they are right now, right, it's just an increased awareness. There should be increased focus and an increased understanding, particularly in critical industries, right? So critical infrastructure, financial services, healthcare, pharma, life sciences, and others, right, as well. But um, those are really, really critical industries, and environments like today. It's about understanding the motivations of those potential nation state actors or nation state funded actors, and really trying to understand the threat intelligence behind that and make sure that the program properly aligns to that.
Yeah, it's funny you say it's you don't think about that, but these nation state actors do have almost unlimited resources compared to enterprise. It really is. It's got to be a challenge. The other challenge I would imagine is all the different regulatory environments that you're going into as you expand into new regions. What changes about how you kind of deliver services operational?
Yeah, and so I think that that's one of the areas that we've had an advantage. Most of our enterprise clients, not all, but many of our enterprise clients do operate globally. Um, so the exposure to all of the uh, different regulatory environments is something common, right? I think companies, for the most part, try to understand that compliance means compliance across the board. So if you're working with a global company, right, and you're talking about um, EU regulations, right, and resilience, like around DORA, for example, right? There's going to be a focus on being compliant across the board because of the global operations. I think that's where it is. And we talk about things like GDPR and CCPA and NYDFS and all these different regulations. I think it just raises the bar for everybody because, right, sort of the the highest compliance standard becomes where everybody has to meet, at least in the highly regulated industries. And so it's elevation for everyone. Um, as the world evolves, I do think, right, coming into more standardization would be beneficial and for the world to look at this similarly. Um, but ultimately, it's a tough job, regulation and trying to understand that people are working really hard to do that. And I think as we continue to grow as a world, right, those things will come together closer and closer together, right? The EU regulations, which are a little bit stronger in a few areas, will come together with some of the regulations in the United States, and that can spread into places like the Middle East and Asia Pacific region.
Well, it's funny. We are kind of. I feel like we're leading in one area, and that's in kind of that quantum defense and trying to get ready for the quantum computer age. How are your clients kind of preparing for quantum? Are you following kind of that NIST standard for algorithms and all of that?
Yeah, so quantum readiness is interesting. We're certainly starting to engage with clients on that, obviously following NIST standards. Um, I think ultimately there's still a lot of unknowns. We do hear regularly about quantum readiness and quantum encryption, and then a year later those algorithms are potentially being breached and things like that. So the world is learning. I think quantum is rapidly knocking on our doorstep. And I think we talk about AI being really a groundbreaking technology. Quantum, I think, is going to be equally interesting. And so, yes, we're working through quantum readiness. I think quantum hardening has already happened in a lot of enterprises, and sort of we're there on the quantum hardening. That's based on the data we have today. That's based on what we know about quantum computing today. The reality is access to quantum computing isn't exactly readily available. And that's a good thing for a lot of things, but we have to assume most nation states are already leveraging that. So um, quantum hardening, I think, is something that's been done. I think true quantum readiness as quantum computing becomes more available will be sort of the next chapter in what we talk about.
Yeah, it definitely is going to be another kind of seismic shift once it happens, and that's
Yeah.
yeah. I think we're beyond the ifs at this point.
Yeah, and I think it'll also be interesting too because quantum is sort of in this space where we're not exactly sure how it will shift the world. We just know it will. I mean, there are things that quantum computing does a lot worse than standard computing, and there are a lot of predictability things that it does infinitely better, right? And so when we look at that, right, I think a lot of the use cases haven't necessarily been developed yet. And we're going to be building and doing things we didn't even think of as concepts, right, without quantum computing. So, I think the steps to go through quantum hardening and upgrade encryption and do the things that need to be done in that space have happened, right? And not saying there's not more work to do. I know there's plenty of more work to do in that space, but certainly an area that people have focused on. But I do think that's going to evolve. I think what we prepared for may not be how it actually practically works once quantum computing really changes. And again, I mean, if you look at the what Google released in the quantum computing chips and things like that, we're still in the infancy, at least from what we can see. We're still in the infancy of what these things are. I mean, if you think about computer chips, like these are the, you know, 8 kilobyte like chips that had minimal processing power. We're not even in the Pentium stage yet, or the
or
386
or of
486 stage.
Pentium and AI either, right? I mean, we're
Yeah.
still in the. I mean, in reality, it's moving quickly, but we're 3 years into kind of GA, general availability of AI, maybe. Um, yeah, I mean, I like your approach of, let's harden for what we know, but we really don't know a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a scary concept too. I think everybody wants to say, well, we do, and they're right on what we know. We know a lot, but we're still learning every day. And what we think today, I think we've already proven over the last year or 18 months, what we know today is probably going to be very different than what we know 18 months from now. And I think that's remarkable when things are moving that quickly. That really strategies need to shift in 18 months because we learned so much more.
Yeah, and I can't imagine the next 36 months. So, Kate, Kate, thank you so much for joining us. Really a eye-opening conversation with you. Thank you for all your expertise, and congratulations again on the award.
Thank you again. Thank you for your time.